Let's look at how nature grows. So the life organism or the life program is one of creativity, of engagement, of serendipity. It is a process of differentiation and then engagement in a way that creates more and more variety over time. And one could say that the game of life is to exist, to be full-bodied, to continue, to be all and everything that it can be. And in doing so, exploring, creating, living, embodying the possibility field in as many faces as possible. Now, when we overlay the human ego, or identity, on top of this process of chaotic and never-ending change, of synergy and combination, when we overlay identity on that process and we identify with a static pattern of energy, this is my body, and a body should be like this and like this and like this, and we link the identity exclusively to that shape, that pattern of energy, then change and life becomes frightening, because change in life becomes painful, because change in life erodes, dissolves, transforms the energy that is in the formation of identity into other things. Identity changes. With new experience, it's like a wash of paint. If you take a sheet of sandstone and you run rusty water over it, or you run an India ink in water over it, there's a different hue. Some of that ink, some of that coloring is absorbed, and now you see in nature, in the dying process of the planet, these endless color variations as one pattern of energy interacted with another. Now, to the eye of the innocent, to the eye of the whole, these changes just are. They're not good, they're not bad, they are becoming. One thing becomes another thing, becomes another thing. As physicists say, no energy is created or destroyed, it only changes shape. And so, from that lens, every new creation is simply an embodiment of all that can be. From the identity, through the lens of the I, the vast majority of the universe, of the multiverse, of reality, is bigger than the I. And the law of mass says that when a larger object combines with a smaller object, the smaller object changes more than the larger object. And when that change is overwhelming and out of our control, we have the phenomena of trauma. A dissolution of self, a dissolution of the ego, a threat to the ego, which cannot adapt fast enough to absorb the velocity and volume of energy that is making contact. This can be a group ganging up on an individual. It can be a tornado interacting with the body. It can be a government violating the stated rights of its people. When a large energy engages with a smaller energy, the cost and the transformation, the change in the smaller energy is enormous, and the cost and the change in the larger energy is minuscule. Thus, one thing changes more than another when that change happens faster than identity will allow. There is shock, there is trauma, there is coming in after the fact and putting together a new identity, a new me. Now, in this process of identity, creation has three core positions. In the process of giving birth, and nature has given birth, if you believe the narrative of the Big Bang, which is a narrative, out of nothing, in one moment, suddenly, poof, a universe and reality is born, and from that point it continues to expand, continues to divide, continues to become more and more creative. Meaning, what exists today on just our little planet is 1 billion times more complex than what existed from our planet. If you think of the size and complexity of our planet as it emerges out of the Big Bang and moves off into all the various particles in the universe, what's there is very small and very simple. If you think of the original amoebic life on the planet, one bit of slime becoming two and diverging, you see this pattern of being one, separating, becoming unique, and then re-relating. Separating, becoming unique, re-relating, re-engaging. The hero's journey in Joseph Campbell's book of the same title. The venture out of the status quo into the unknown, the encounter with the unknown, which is always larger than the known. The encounter of an energy larger than oneself. In the question on the hero's journey, will it consume the hero or heroine? Will it traumatize and debilitate the hero or heroine? Or will the hero and heroine expand and become more in that encounter with the unknown, so that what is brought back to the whole is enriching? Because when you understand that everything is an energy pattern in inextricable relationship with every other energy pattern, in a dance of evolution, of diversity, of change, then one nourishes, one gives life to an organism by feeding energy, by feeding knowledge, by feeding technology, by feeding attention, by feeding creativity, exposure, diversity. One gives life with diversity. Nature abhors a vacuum. Nature abhors a monocrop because monocrops are vulnerable to collapse. Monocrops have a hard time changing. Cultures producing a monocrop of psyche, a monocrop of personas and identity, have difficult time changing. In part because having identified with a very fragile and temperamental and volatile and short-lived energy pattern, the human body within a certain cult belief system, and saying, that's me. Well, that me is in, that identity is in tension with 99% of reality that is bigger more massive, and different in reality, which means that when those energies collide, the identity is lost, that energy is absorbed. And so it is in space. 99.9% of all physical reality is space, be it at the atomic level. An atom is made up of 99% space and two small particles moving very fast. A universe is made up of 99.9% space and particles moving in relationship. It is in that space, that yin or feminine principle, that diversity emerges. The space for difference, the space for diversity. Because when there is no more space, when it all collapses to that single particle, emerging from the Big Bang and going back into that void, all of that diversity disappears as the space is vacuumed up and becomes non-existent. The law of resonance says that all things in proximity will ultimately vibrate to the same frequency. The law of mass says that the larger mass will change the smaller mass more than the smaller mass changes the larger mass. Nature creates diversity through space. Now, this process of differentiation, of birth, unity, differentiation, and coming back into relationship with the whole as something unique, is how life creates life. It's how creativity expands. A child expresses this, a human life expresses this with the process of sympathy, antipathy, synthesis. The yes and acceptance of life as it is, of the child and infant, the rebellion of the status quo, of the adolescent, the yes and the no in their extreme forms, and the new formation of an adult, the new formation of an identity that is distinct, that is complex, that is new in the fabric of creation. And I want to suggest that this same process of sympathy, antipathy, synthesis, child, adolescent, adult, happens in any new relationship. If you fall in love, it's a yes to everything about the partner. When the honeymoon phase ends, it's a no. What was I thinking? I hate everything about my partner. And in a mature relationship, I like these things, I don't like these things, I can work with this, this is a difficult thing. I choose this path as my distinct way of relating in some ways, not in others, having space for diversity. This process of sympathy, antipathy, synthesis, of child, adolescent, and becoming a unique adult, a responsible adult, self-oriented. In a healthy maturation process, it happens with the parent and the child. It happens with the culture and the individual. It happens with the government and the citizen. It happens with one's romantic partner. And the process continues. As two adults, having gone through the sympathy, the antipathy, and become a unique adult, come together, their child in the synergy of those two adults, again, the yes, the rebellion, and the new shape. The synergy is always more powerful, mathematically speaking, than the two constituent ingredients. The alchemy, the third energy that is created in the space between two polarities, is always more potentiated, has a bigger possibility field than the two parts combined. You can think of a light bulb, some wire, and a battery. When you put them together, the synergy of light coming out of a light bulb, when they're combined, and just, it's a bigger possibility field than just the one or the other. This is life. This is growth. Sympathy, antipathy, synthesis. And it is necessary. Every step in that process is necessary. You have to say yes as an infant in a helpless state, as a small mass surrounded by a large mass. To grow up and have any chance of uniqueness, one has to rebel against whatever is there. And then there's the opportunity to move from the adolescent to the adult, to form something new. And this is life. This is surrendering to life's dance. Now, as one becomes something new, there is a gravitational pull to all of the large masses of energy around the individual. If you think of the rocket experience of leaving Earth's orbit, something that human beings on this planet are just beginning to taste, the power and freedom to break free of the planet, a larger fractal pattern of breaking free of the parent, breaking free of the dogmatism in one's religion, breaking free of the calcification in one's cult or culture, to break away from one's planet, to break away from one's identity of habits and patterns on this environment. It requires an enormous thrust. One of the most powerful phenomena on the planet that is human-made is the propulsion of a rocket booster, pushing what is a very small payload, meaning the booster is many times bigger than what is being projected out of Earth's orbit, out of the gravitational pull of a much larger pattern of energy that we are a part of and that influences us. And we spend this enormous amount of energy to break orbit, to pull away from the status quo, from a large pattern of energy, to pull away. And then once we've broken free of the orbit, it takes almost no energy at all. 10, 100 times less to position, to orient oneself in the freedom of space. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to leave a marriage that has tremendous gravitational pull, or a culture, or a country, or a known way of thinking. Once you've exerted that force to pull out into space, one has freedom to decide which new patterns of energy to relate to. If you relate to a very large energy, it's often an energy, if you think of a black hole, for example, it distorts and destroys everything that comes into its path. It cannot maintain its separate identity. You think of the problem of a 50-year-old man who's a billionaire with clear ideas and resources and skill sets in relationship with a 15-year-old lover or a 30-year-old lover who has not developed that independence. The gravitational pull, the problem, is of being sucked into the pattern of energy that is much larger, that has more momentum, more gravitational pull, such that the individual is lost. A dominant personality with a pleaser. The pleaser is lost, doesn't have the chance to develop in the same way that two shy people might venture out and discover who they are without being bowled over by a larger pattern of energy that destroys that which it encounters by altering it too much before it has a chance to develop, before it can become part of something new. Life's program is diversity. It's becoming, evolving, changing, shifting. So that at the end of 1 billion years, there is infinitely more on the canvas of life that exists than there was 1 billion years earlier, thus ensuring life. Life ensures life. Being ensures being. Creativity ensures creativity. And we are a part of this program. Now, as we venture out into the unknown as individuals, to become something unique, as we venture out into the unknown to become something unique, as we pull away from the known, as we exert force to rebel, to break free, on a physical level of our home of origin, of our set community, in order for there to be something completely unique and newborn, one must leave the familiar. One must go on the hero's journey into the unknown, so that the sympathy of the child, the rebellion of the adolescent, the color wheel of encounters with diversity and unknown, the journey around the world, the journey to another culture, the reading of books that were not sanctioned in the family, can create enough neutrality that something new can emerge in the space between, that is unique, that contributes to life's dance, that contributes to life's journey by being itself. And as any new creation is formed, as a seedling takes root and begins to blossom, as the first two leaves of an oak tree come into being, it is vulnerable to extermination. One bite of a deer, one ground of a cow's hoof, one 5-year-old kicking the dirt. The oak tree is lost as a possibility or as an actuality field. It remains as a possibility, but it's not in this reality. It's lost on this dimension. And so part of the question as we move towards something new, part of the question is, where does what is new fall on the intelligence continuum, relating to the underlying drive of every human being in history to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse, to move towards beauty, truth, and goodness, to move towards grace, to move towards efficiency. Where does where does something fall on that continuum? Is the new identity of the newly formed adult, of the newly formed community, of the newly formed country, culture, religion, belief system, cult, is what is formed more graceful, more intelligent? Does it yield a higher amount of sustainable well-being for its members, for its participants, than the technology, than the pattern of energy before? Per unit of energy invested, it's not just does it yield something more, but per unit of energy invested, is it easier? Is it more graceful, more beautiful? Do more people who participate in this new form of energy, a new form of consciousness, a new form of energy, this pattern, do they experience more well-being than the pattern of energy that they emerge from? And how does that occur? Because now you have a new identity, you have a new formation of energy, and to the degree that it delivers, to the degree that it immediately takes less energy for more sustainable well-being, it will grow in size. That's also life. Life is designed to win. The reason America has grown over the last 400 years is it offered more well-being in certain threads of probability fields per unit of energy than the host country of the immigrants. There's more possibility for this or this or this to emerge in this culture than in Czechoslovakia or Russia or some other country. And so it draws consciousness to participate in a pattern of engaging that yields superior well-being per unit of energy involved. And there is a chaos. There is an unknown that one must travel through. There is a void. And in this void, in this chaos, in this unknown, every echo of the dominant energy patterns around one or in the past will seek to attract the energy. This religion wants you to join them. This religion wants you to join them. That religion wants you to join them. This group wants you to give them money. That group wants you to give them money. That group wants you to give them money. This person wants you to agree with their point of view. This person with their point of view. This person with their point of view. This culture, the magnetism of belonging, the magnetism of a whole group. Now, in isolation, there have been 10,000 cultures in human history, and most of them are now extinct, superseded by superior cultures, using the metrics used by the new culture. First, you define the value hierarchy, and once you have defined your value hierarchy, now some cultures rank higher on that, and others rank lower. And if whatever it is you value highest is enabled in a given environment, you will be drawn into the gravitational pull of that culture. So cultures emerge as unique cultures in isolation, and much of the planet has been without jet planes, etc. And so a culture could exist in isolation and thus hold its own because it was not imposed upon by a more massive culture or a better culture. They didn't make contact. Now, as there are no oases of isolation, relatively speaking, in order for a new cult or a new pattern of energy of engaging to take hold, it must be viewed as a new technology and adopted by conscious choice by adults which are often not produced by the current cultures on the planet. Many cultures produce children, docile people who do what the authority says. Other cultures produce rebels, which if you just rebel against something, you can't get anything done. And there is a deficit of synthesizing adults with a software pattern capable of developing new cults, new patterns of energy, new cultures, and measuring the relative pros and cons of one versus the other. Now, in order for a new technology, now that we're in the technology era of memes, in order for a new technology of thinking, feeling, doing, whether that is in any number of different dimensions, the eating, sleeping, etc., superior engagement, mentally, emotionally, and physically. What we can learn from economic adaptation is that it needs to be superior. It needs to be not just superior from the past, it needs to be 10 times, 7 times. It needs to be significantly better at yielding sustainable well-being than the technology before. Otherwise, it crumbles into what was. It does not get adopted. There isn't the motivation to spend the enormous amount of energy it takes to break orbit with the status quo, to encounter the fear of the unknown, to face the traumas that reside in a trauma-illiterate culture in the unknown, and begin finding new paths to sustainable well-being. It takes a process of designing and then measuring the outcome in well-being for a new technology, breaking orbit, and then moving and creating with enough gravitational pull, with enough people, 10, 20 people, committedly working on this new shape, so that it can take form, so that it can crystallize into something that yields massive amounts of sustainable well-being. And every single one of the large energies in the past, the gravitational pulls from past religion and their fears and their doubts and their guilt, the gravitational pulls from every one of those must be encountered with the sympathy, the antipathy, and the synthesis to move beyond into the unknown with intelligence, with the not just the rebellion of the adolescents, but the wisdom, the vision, the insight of the adult to create something new that gains hold, so that life is allowed to flow through each one of us, through the species.